Alright, so if you've watched some of the videos on the channel, you probably know that I now ride a BMW S1000rr, and it has now been a month since I picked this bike up, and I wanted to do a video earlier, but I wanted to put some miles on this thing before I give my real honest review of this bike. Now there's a lot of things I really love about this bike. I would never trade it for anything, I don't think, at this point anyway. Even though I've ridden some bikes here recently that really impressed me, I still think that I would stick with my BMW. But with that being said, as with everything, there are some things that I'm not super impressed with. But before we get into that, I'm gonna do a little walk around of the bike so you guys can see exactly what this thing is all about. I picked this bike up from Eurocycles about a month ago now. But this particular bike, it is the 2021 BMW S1000rr with the M Package, which means that it has all the goodies on it. It's got the carbon fiber wheels, it's got the M Package paint scheme to it. And the other additional things that this bike has is it's got all of the billet pieces directly from BMW. All of the M pieces are on this bike. It is literally decked out with everything. Now, up till this point, the only thing that I've done differently is I cleaned up the tail a little bit. I got rid of that big old fender on the back, and I went with the TST Industries tail light, which is not on the market as of this video, but it should hit the market soon. In my opinion, it's going to be the best option for the BMW S1000rr, the 2020, 2021, and it looks like it's from the factory. Other than that, I have not done anything to this bike. I do want to get the exhaust done because it is extremely quiet, and I'm not a huge fan of that. And then once I do that, then I want to do the Bren tune for it. That way we can open this thing up, because it does have a lot of power, but there's also a lot of missing power since it's so detuned from the factory, just for emissions and all that good stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna jump on this thing and go for a ride, and I'm gonna talk about what I like and what I don't like about this BMW.
This is the 2021 BMW S1000rr M Package. And not just any BMW S1000rr, but it is my personal bike. Honestly, this was always my dream bike, and I'm very, very excited to actually own this bike now. And now that I've had the bike for a month now, I've put about 2,000 miles on it, I feel like I can actually talk about what I like and what I don't like about it. Now, if you watched the previous video, I actually did test ride this bike before I knew that I was going to actually purchase it. But anyway, now that we bought it, we put some miles on it, let's talk about what I truly think about this bike. And just a little bit of background, I come from CBRs. I've always been a Honda guy. Before this, I had a CBR 1000. I've had a couple of those. I had some CBR 600rrs as well. And this is a completely different bike than anything I've ever ridden before. Now, before I get into the things that I'm not super pleased with about this bike, let's talk about the things that I do like. As we're sitting at this red light, it gives me time to look at the dash. The dash is the most beautiful dash I've ever seen on a motorcycle. The nice thing about this dash is that it is Bluetooth enabled, which means that my phone connects to it, and the Bluetooth from my helmet also connects to it, and I control everything through the bike rather than having to worry about messing with my phone or the buttons on my Bluetooth. And to navigate everything, you've got a Wonder Wheel over here. If you can see this, it actually goes, it rolls forward and backwards and right and left. It's very, very easy to use, especially when you're on the go. Nice thing about everything being Bluetooth connected is that I've got my menu buttons right here. So if I want to, I can dip down, I can get to all of these things, telephone, media, navigation, all this good stuff right here. So if I go to media, I can click down, I can see exactly what I'm listening to, and I can change the song just by using the little Wonder Wheel over here, which to me is kind of a cool thing if you're just out on the streets and you want to listen to some good music while you're hanging out on the streets. The other nice thing that I really like about this bike is how smooth it shifts. Now I'm going to dig into this topic a little bit later, but right now, city driving, I'm using the clutch. Now remember, this thing does have a quick shifter, but right now I'm using the clutch and the gearbox is buttery smooth. Now I understand this is a brand new bike and you'd expect everything to work perfectly and smooth and everything else, but that's not always the case. Every bike acts a little bit differently. This one is extremely smooth in the gearbox. The other thing is the controls. They literally have a button for everything. This thing has cruise control, which is right over here. You've got your wonder wheel again over here, which controls everything on the dash, along with the menu buttons, which, in my opinion, is very easy to use. It also has heated grips, which I didn't think that I would ever use heated grips, but the more that I ride this thing, and not so much right now, but when I got it, it was cold outside, and the heated grips really came in handy. I didn't realize how much a little bit of heat on the hands would help with the overall comfortability of riding in colder weather. Heated grips, big thumbs up. The other thing that's nice about the accessibility of everything is it's got your modes button right here, and you can change that on the fly. Now, I'm not in any of the race pro modes, I'm just in your standard modes. Right now I'm riding in dynamic, which I find to be the easiest and best riding mode for typical street riding. But if you wanted to switch between rain mode, I think there's a road mode and a race mode, you can do that all with this button right here. A couple other quick features that I want to talk about while I'm sitting at yet another red light. This thing has a fuel gauge, as you can see right there, which in my opinion every bike should come with a fuel gauge, but a lot of them don't. So even on my CBR, I just had to track mileage. I knew how many miles I could get out of a tank, and then when I got close to those miles, I would stop and fill up. This thing actually tells you how much gas you have with the bar grid, and then when you get down low enough, it'll actually tell you how many miles you have until empty, which is extremely beneficial when you're out cruising around. Oh yes, which also reminds me of another beautiful feature of this display. Check this out. So if I go down on the menu button, I go over to my vehicle, and I go down on that. It'll tell me everything I need to know about the bike, even down to the tire pressure, how many miles I have till empty. It tells me how my battery's looking, front and rear tire pressure, as well as engine temp. And there's also other places in here that I can play around with, which will allow me to see other things of the bike, like intake, air temperature, and other stuff that I didn't know I needed to know. It is all in the computer. It does have a quick shifter, but it's good and bad. I don't know how I think about that. It's actually the first quick shifter that I've ever had on a bike. I've just always been a manual shifter. With this bike, if you're cruising around town like normal, the quick shifter, in my opinion, is useless. It's kind of hard to engage. It's kind of hard to use. You have to push too hard, and it's not super smooth. So personally, if I'm cruising around town, I'm using the clutch, and that's typically if I'm at lower RPMs. I'm just using the clutch. My opinion, there might be a way to adjust it. I haven't really looked that far into it because it doesn't really bother me that much. But typically, again, if I'm cruising around town, I'm using the hand to pull the clutch and make my shifts. Now, if you're someplace where it's legal to do so and you decide to get on it, high RPMs, and just booking it, the quick shifter is amazing. It is butter smooth, and as fast as you can kick that foot, it'll shift, and it's kind of hard to explain, but it's smooth power all the way through. The best way I can explain it is it's just constant power from whatever speed to whatever high speed you want to go. And it's almost like an electric vehicle because there's no hesitation. It's just constant until you decide that you don't want to go any faster. It just keeps going and going and going. This thing's got all these race pro modes, which I have not played with yet because I need to make an appointment to get the suspension set up for myself, which I believe is like the sag and a couple other things, before I can truly utilize all the electronics of the suspension. Now, I'm not a big suspension guy. I don't know enough about it for me to be tweaking things, so I actually take it someplace and have them do it. But getting your suspension set up to you will make a night and day difference in the way your bike handles. I know that for a fact because I've done that with my CBRs, and let's just say that those bikes rode and felt amazing. Overall, I really love this bike. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was my dream bike. I have it. I am extremely happy with it. But with everything, there are some things that, of course, you would want to change. Now I can see why BMW drivers and riders fail to use their blinkers so often, and that's because it's hard to get to. Like with the Wonder Wheel over here, the blinker's way over here. It's kind of a stretch unless you take your hand off and use it. I'm not used to that because I'm used to being able to access the blinker just with reaching my thumb out. But with this thing, I literally have to take my hand off just to get to it. So I can see why a lot of people would just say screw it and just not use it. I will say this bike is amazing though. I love the way this bike feels. It feels so good. It is a blast to ride. The other downside to the bike from the factory as it sits is it is extremely detuned. It should be a criminal offense to sell a bike like this that's detuned the way that it is. But I guess I understand it's due to emissions and all that garbage. Now with that being said, I have done quite a bit of reading on the Brembo tune and the full exhaust, and by the sounds of it, I can open that up by doing the Brembo tune, doing the full exhaust. There's a handful of things that can be done to get rid of that little flat spot in the beginning of your RPM range, which I plan on doing all those things. Obviously, it just takes some money and you can open it up. But even with those things, you know, kind of hold me back a little bit. Honestly, the bike is still a joy to ride. I mean, how fast you really need to go and how fast you need to get there, I don't know. Up for discussion, whatever. I'm not racing anybody. I'm just out here having a good time. Now, the seating of this bike is very similar to the older generation of the BMW S1000rrs. You're sitting very in the bike. It's not super aggressive, but it is aggressive to a certain extent. But overall, it's a very comfortable bike. So on my bike, I actually have the M Sport seat, which is a little bit harder. It's not quite as thick. It's more of a race-inspired seat. And even with that, it's actually pretty comfortable. I don't really have a whole lot of complaints. And then as far as like the seating position, obviously it's a sport bike. You can't ask for much. But even though it's a sport bike and you're sitting pretty aggressively, it's actually pretty comfortable. I'm sitting almost straight up right now, and the bike is just super smooth, and I just really like it. And then to add on to that, you know, a lot of times when we're riding these things for long periods of time, your right hand can go numb or start to just strain a little bit. But not to worry, because over here we still have that cruise control. So if I kick that on just like that, I can free this hand up and I can just chill. I can just do what I want, patty cake all day long. It doesn't matter because I've got cruise control. Another thing about how comfortable it is the bike is wide. It feels kind of wide, which personally I like that. My CBR I felt was very narrow, which isn't the end of the world, but I just felt like it was almost too narrow, almost uncomfortably narrow. This thing is a little bit wider. It fills you out just a little bit better, and personally I like that feel when I'm on a bike. I like to feel like there's something under me, and this definitely feels like there's something under you, which is incredible because the thing only weighs like 420 pounds, and it feels like, at least size-wise, it's girthy. I mean, it's got some size to it, but it's still super light. Another thing that I feel like BMW did very well with this bike is the brakes. These things are damn near perfect. You give it a little bit of tug, nice and smooth, nice and smooth. You can do a slow, gradual grab to it, and their stopping power is amazing. Now, if you had to quick brake, you could also do that as well. Also very smooth. Thankfully, I've yet to really need to do a quick stop on this bike. But with that being said, obviously I still test out everything safety-wise on every bike that I ride before I ride it. That way I know what to expect. So when I did my quick stop test with this bike before really going for a ride, I was very impressed. The other thing, as far as, you know, how this thing really like rides, looking at like the corners and stuff like that you would typically want to take this bike through. Now keep in mind that this is the M Package, which means that it's got the carbon fiber wheels, which means less rotational mass. Now when you're leaned over, it lays over a lot smoother than something with a heavier wheel. And I guess the best way to explain it is there's not as much mass. If you have a wheel or a tire and you roll it down the road, it stands straight up because of the rotational mass, which is keeping it balanced upright. Kind of think about that when you're talking about a motorcycle wheel that wants to do the same thing. Now, if you cut some of that weight down, that means when you're over in a corner, you're not going to have all that excess weight trying to pick you back up, which in return just means that you're going to carve through that corner a lot smoother, more control than what you would feel with a heavier wheel. Honestly, I didn't think that it would be that big of a difference, but I have to say, the first time I rode this, that was the first thing I noticed when I dropped this thing into a corner. Now, I would love to take you guys through some corners today, but as you can see, I'm in Florida, which is pretty flat, straight roads, so hopefully you just take my word for that. But I will be going to the mountains here in 2 weeks, and I'm super excited to take this bike up there for the first time. Last time I went up there, I took the CBR 1000rr, and I had a blast. I can only imagine that it doesn't matter what bike you take up there, you're gonna have a lot of fun. And as I'm sitting in traffic here, it brings up another point. One of those things that's not the end of the world, but I'm not super thrilled about, and that is finding neutral. Some bikes are just hard to find neutral. I don't know what it is. The Aprilia that I rode, the new RSV, that thing, the neutral was extremely easy to find, and I really like that. On this thing, sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. It's a very short throw from first to second, which is good if you're riding and you're getting on it. So if you're doing like a first gear roll, you've got second gear damn near right there. But the issue is when you go to stop and you're trying to find neutral, it's a little hard to find it. You end up going back and forth between the two gears until you finally hit neutral. Now I'm getting better at it, I'm getting used to it, but just something to keep in mind. Anyway, this Florida heat has done me no good, so I'm going to go sit in the AC until tonight when it cools off, and then I'm going to do some real riding and enjoy this bike like I've been doing for the past month. Again, this is an incredible bike. I do love this bike. If you're looking to buy one of these and you have any specific questions, leave a comment below and I will answer any questions that anybody has. The video is just kind of an overview of the things that stick out to myself. So, the big question is, would I buy this bike again? Yes. Do I love this bike? Yes. And I love this cruise control. Can't go wrong with that.